Senator Givens, Senator Kerr, Senator McGarvey, Senator Meredith, Senator Nemes,
Present in the room.
Senator Webb, Senator West, Chairman McDaniel.
Here. Senator McGarvey walked in as well. All right, so first up is going to be House Bill 405. Representative Heverin, if you want to come on up here. So if anyone wants, at this point, there is a committee substitute. If you, the staff, would please pass that out. Oh, it is in your folders. Forgive me. So I will entertain a motion to adopt the committee substitute to House Bill 405. From Senator Caslin, do I have a second? From Senator Carroll. Very well. The sub is adopted. And just for Representative Pratt, I saw you out there. Your bill's going to be at the end, just so you know, so you don't get, if you've got a few things to do, you've got some time. The sub is adopted. So, Representative, if you don't care, you can speak to the underlying bill briefly, and then I'll talk about the sub.
For the record, I'm Samara Heverin. I represent the 18th District, and I'm carrying this bill for Representative Ken Fleming this morning. This is a easy bill, as we all like to say in the House, and it's an act authorizing the payment of certain claims against the state, which have been duly audited and approved according to law and have not been paid because of the lapsing or insufficiency of former appropriations. This is an annual bill that gets done every year, and I'll wrap it up with that. Okay, well, we have a motion. I think we would like to explain why the animal clinic in Lawrenceburg needed $294.62. No, so that I wondered that myself.
we do have a motion on the bill. This is also being used, if you'll look towards the back there, starting with Section 5. There are additional items, particularly related to the Commonwealth's budget, that we wanted to make sure made it in before we left out of town. And just going over them briefly, there's $4 million of various fund money going to the Attorney General for personnel. The lab personnel, as part of the overall raise, have moved to a 40-hour work week. There's $20 million for prevention services, $37 million to work as grants through the Justice Administration Cabinet to work on COVID reduction in congregate facilities. There's $10 million allocated to SFCC for State of Emergency Assistance Fund for schools that were damaged in the most recent flooding. The Office of Attorney General has gotten $2 million from coronavirus relief to deal with coronavirus related crimes. There is language about the governor not using American Rescue Plan Act money and penalty for that. There is an additional position allocated to proprietary education. There is language stating that the minimum of 65% of contracted beds in mental health facilities that the Commonwealth contracts with have to be kept filled. There's a $2 CCAP reimbursement rate included in there, and there is also a study group on the SEEK funding formula. So, for those on this committee who have nothing in the interim and are really looking to stay busy, get your applications in very soon, and you too can be on that committee. So, at this time, I have a motion from Senator Caslin. Do I have a second? From President Pro Tem Givens. Do I have questions or comments on this one? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Buford, Senator Carroll,
Aye.
Senator Caslin, Senator Givens, Senator Kerr, Senator McGarvey, Senator Meredith, Senator Nemes,
Aye.
Senator Webb, Senator West, Chairman McDaniel.
Aye. There being 8 ayes, no nays, the measure passes. We have a title amendment. Can I have a motion on the title amendment? Senator Meredith, do I have a second? Senator Caslin, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. Do I have a motion for consent? From Senator Nemes, do I have a second? Senator Caslin, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. Motion carries. Representative, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you all so much.
We appreciate you. Okay, So next up, because we are skipping around just a little bit here this morning, is Fitz online? He is. Okay. So next up, we are going to go to House Bill 320, an act relating to the provision of broadband services and making appropriation therefore. Once again, at this point in time, there is a committee substitute involved. So can I have a motion on the committee sub? Senator Meredith, do I have a second? President Givens. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. Gentlemen, would you like to talk to the underlying bill, and then Senator Givens will talk to the sub? All right, very good.
Yes, sir.
Representative, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Brandon Reed, represent the 24th House District, Green, LaRue, and Marion counties. I have with me today the chairman of the House A&R.
Jason Petrie, State Rep for House District 16, Logan, Todd, and part of Warren counties.
Far and away the better looking of the chairs. Please proceed, gentlemen.
Thank you. House Bill 320 basically has two sections. It deals with the broadband scenario that we are facing in the Commonwealth. Section 1 is a PSC fix for the co-ops. There's language in there that describes that. I know there's a committee sub that will go into greater detail from your all's behalf, but that's the general conclusion for Section 1. Section 2, the bill is basically the money that goes with the premise funding broadband in the Commonwealth of Kentucky that goes with HB563 from 2020 from Representative Pratt. So that is the two sections of the bills, and I know you all have a committee sub to go into detail.
Very well. Before President Givens talks about the committee sub, I just wanted to say, for those who might be online, you need to understand that from Jump Street in this session, these two have spearheaded this issue and done very well by their districts. So if you are represented by them, they have been at the forefront of this issue. So your constituents all owe you a debt of gratitude. A lot of times we don't get to hear that around this place, but they certainly should know that they do. So, President Givens, the floor is yours, sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thanks for adopting the sub. And I want to echo the words that you've just said about the work that these two gentlemen and other leaders on the House side have brought to the table as it relates to this broadband issue. So many times in the General Assembly, when we have a big issue like this, someone has to take the leap of faith to make space for us to have the conversations. But for your all's leadership, we couldn't have gotten to where I think we're headed with this. We know the value of broadband across our Commonwealth, especially in our rural communities where it can impact property values, it can impact access to education, it can impact technologies that grow businesses. So thank you all for your leadership on this. We've taken your language, we've refined it a little, and I'm going to walk through it slowly enough that members can accumulate questions along the way for which the two of you will have to help me answer. One of the first changes we made, Mr. Chairman, was a slight redundant but comforting redefinition of the word broadband. We purposely added the words fixed wireless into the definition of broadband, feeling like they were there already in the words fixed terrestrial technology, but some found more comfort in us specifically saying fixed wireless. We then moved down into underserved and unserved and did a little bit of drafting cleanup to take out some confusion with words that related back to fixed terrestrial. We basically have changed underserved and unserved to start with this definition. It means any project area where broadband service, which is now very clearly defined above, and then we continue on with the standards of 25 and 3 for the underserved, 10 and 1 for the unserved. Mr. Chairman, this was a passion of yours, and I think very appropriately so. When we move into the 25% co-op opportunity, where we're permitting a co-op to pledge up to 25% of their assets, there needs to be some standard for pledging of assets and then the potential that an investment can go wrong and the impact on the shareholders of that co-op. So you've added language, and I thoroughly support it. On page 2, lines 13 and 14, the Commission shall grant approval of the leasing of excess capacity, the issuing of securities or evidences of indebtedness, or the pledging of assets. We need PSC to be continuing to watch the way these funds are invested to be certain that the shareholders and the members, their investments are protected. The language that everyone has been so excited to hear what we've done is going to be a little disappointing because it doesn't take up 3 pages like so many of the drafts that were sent to us on poll attachments. Drafts with new words and languages, and of all the things we can adjudicate, we've struggled with billboards this session. I couldn't imagine what we'd do with polls. So with that, we have inserted on page 3, and this is a serious topic. I'm not being flippant or light about it because it does impact our ability to get this pushed out. But I simply don't know that the General Assembly is the body to adjudicate poll attachments. So we've inserted language that says prior to December 31, 2021, the Public Service Commission shall promulgate administrative regulations regarding poll attachments under the Commission's jurisdiction, including those necessary for the provision of broadband service. Now, some are going to say, well, that doesn't cover all of them, that doesn't address all of it. Hold your thought and hold your question, because I'll explain why we can certainly come back and do more if we need to. But I would encourage all those that are watching, listening, or interested, if you like for us to try and take your issue and wrestle it to the ground, we can really disappoint you. Because we all come from different places with different political interests. So let's try to do good policy, and we felt like the PSC was the place to do that. We did purposely take out language just above that insert. There was some interest in language about a distribution co-op shall not provide broadband service to an unserved or underserved household. And this was the overbill concern. Mr. Chairman, we talked about that just a moment ago, and I know it's been on people's minds. If you are a provider into an area and you're unserving or underserving that area, you deserve to be built over. Elevate your game, get the people served adequately, and that takes that area out of competition for anyone to build over. So we've taken that language out of the original as we had the bill out at the top of what I have as page 3. 2 more changes to highlight, 3 more changes to highlight, and we'll certainly address any questions, Mr. Chairman. Along with the standard of 25 down and 3 up, and these other standards of 10 and 1 for unserved and underserved, we felt compelled to add some reliability language. The story I've used is in my rural community. Representative Reed, you know it well from knowing Greene County. I've got fixed wireless access from a water tower about 1.5 miles away from my home. Perfect line of sight for about 7 months of the year when there are no leaves on the trees. If you came at the right time and measured, I probably would hit the 25 down, 3 up, but only for those 7 months. So we've added some reliability language saying that a broadband service provider shall ensure that adequate broadband services are provided in a manner to prevent seasonal outages or any outage that is more than intermittent in nature. The other thing we want to make sure and do, we want someone to be, because there's going to be government monies in this, we want someone to be the point of contact for complaints. In addition to all other powers conferred to it under this statute, the Public Service Commission shall have jurisdiction to resolve, under KRS 278-260, any complaints relating to service outages. Now, 2 other pieces, one of which everyone is very tuned in on, Mr. Chairman. We've had great discussions about, and as you mentioned earlier in conversations we've had, the level of funding that we're putting into the fund is something that started at one place, rode the roller coaster up to a big number, came back down, settled, and then started riding around again, and then suddenly the federal government says, we've got money. Let's go and do. The language we have in the bill says there is hereby appropriated federal funds in the amount of $250 million in fiscal year 21-22 to the Broadband Deployment Fund, that's the fund with KIA, with no more than $50 million of which to be awarded before April 1, 2022. We're saying the money is there, but we're saying wait and spend up to $50 million. From July 1 through the end of March of next year, $50 million is there to get things rolling, to plant the seed, to fund the fund. Knowing that we're going to be back in January, so if we have poll attachment arguments, if we have things going beautifully and wonderfully, which I hope on the behalf of our Commonwealth that that's the case, we'll come in the first week and we'll flow down all the other 200 right into the fund and say go. But let's get people doing it right before we start overfunding or funding in ways that cause potential mischief or poor investment. Last language change I'll point out, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for the indulgence. We did a couple of things as it relates to the projects that qualify. We would like for projects in underserved or unserved areas to be considered first, projects in those areas that are inadequately funded to be second, and then certainly projects that are least economical to serve to be third. We do permit the use of matching funds from a city, county, or urban county government or consolidated local government of not less than 50% of the total project. So we may use private monies, entities that apply may use private match monies or matching funds from city, county, and urban county government. With that, Mr. Chairman, we would certainly be glad to entertain any questions.
Thank you very much, President Givens. And so everybody knows, I'm going to try to wind this down here in about the next 5 minutes. I know that we've got Fitz online. Fitz, you want to come up and make a comment or two?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Tom Fitzgerald, Director of the Kentucky Resources Council. I, too, would like to thank the sponsors, thank the Chairman of the House A&R for advocating for better access to rural broadband. There's no bigger fan than I am. One of the reasons I opposed one of the telephone utilities' efforts to deregulate for years was because I knew that left unregulated rural areas would suffer and urban areas would be focused on. My concern, which is addressed in the committee sub, was that pledging the assets of the members of the co-ops, because the co-ops don't have shareholders to share risk, they have simply members, that there needed to be clear language that the commission had discretion to review and determine, to look at the business plan to determine that pledging those assets to a new affiliated venture was a prudent step, and because the assets of the co-ops basically have been bought and paid for by the members, and before they were pledged to a new venture that the co-ops traditionally had not been involved in. I just wanted to make sure that there was some clear language regarding the commission's discretion to review under KRS 278-300 and otherwise to make sure that the investment plan was prudent. And I appreciate the language of the committee sub clarifying that, and also clarifying some of the other issues that I had heard raised by other stakeholders. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I appreciate your work, appreciate the work that the House sponsors have done to hopefully to bring us forward. This year has shown us in stark contrast how important access to broadband is for not only economic development, for education and for health. So I appreciate that.
Very well. Okay, and I think one more word before Tom heads offline there. This may be his last committee meeting as the director of the Natural Resources Council, is the rumor.
The Kentucky Resources Council. This is this may be, although I jinxed myself by saying that the other day in the Natural Resources Committee, Mr. Chairman, if in fact this is my last testimony, I can't think of a better way to go out than talking to this committee. You and Chairman Petrie had done a remarkable job this year in terms of the budget and the promise that we have coming up to as you said, to be bold. And so I look forward to that. I may just come back and volunteer to help staff the committee there, which I think would not be something of value that would violate the ethics policy. So
very
thank
well.
You, though.
Well, we appreciate the service that you have long provided, and you've been an invaluable resource to many, many of us. So thank you. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With that, does anyone on the committee have any questions? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion on the bill. Senator Caslin, do I have a second? Senator Carroll. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Buford. Senator Carroll.
Aye.
Senator Caslin.
Cast your vote and explain, sir.
But I cast an aye vote today, and I just want to thank Representative Petrie and Representative Reed. All these things don't always turn out to be exactly the way we want them through the process, but as an individual from rural Kentucky and as an individual whose district was really for this, I just thank you all for spearheading and leading the way on this.
Senator Givens, Senator Kerr, Senator McGarvey.
Explain my aye vote, Mr. Chairman.
Cast your vote and explain, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the work here. Obviously, I'm a big supporter of expanding broadband access in Kentucky to all areas of Kentucky, whether it's our underserved rural populations or underserved urban populations. We need to be focused on this initiative. I'm voting yes today, but I do want to voice one note of at least concern or pause for concern. Yesterday, we passed a budget, and we talked about the fact we were not appropriating federal money because we weren't ready to do so at that point. Today we are making a change in a bill where we are putting federal money into this legislation without knowing exactly all of the guidelines and everything that goes along with that. I don't love the piecemeal approach that this seems to be taking at this point. Hope we can continue to take a holistic view of how this interacts with our state budget and the federal money coming in, just to make sure that it's best used altogether.
Senator Meredith, Senator Nemus,
Aye.
Senator Webb, Senator West,
Aye.
Chairman McDaniel.
Aye. Being 8 ayes, no nays, the measure passes. President Givens, are you going to want to speak to this on the floor? All right, very well. Then we're not going to go for consent just for that reason, but we'll go from there. All right, gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd just like to say thank you to the committee and especially Senator Givens and yourself. I think the sub, I'll go on the record, I looked at it just a little bit earlier, went through the point by point. I think it makes good improvements on what we presented to you, and you're sending us back a better product, and I appreciate it.
Very well.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, gentlemen, for everything. We appreciate you. All right, so next up we're going to go to House Bill 563. So everyone knows how this is going to work. It appears, so we're going to take testimony and questions until about 9:20. Representative McCoy, what I'm going to do is we're going to start out. I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes up front. We've got some folks online who want to testify in opposition. I'm going to give them 10 minutes. So those online know my commitment was to Ms. Waterbury, who had reached out to give her 5 minutes. So you're going to go first, Ms. Waterbury, and then I'm going to give a Eddie, I'm going to go to you after that in some combination of you and Ms. Bauman have the second 5 minutes. Then Representative McCoy, it's going to go back to you guys for 5. Okay, so you get 5, and then they get 10, and you guys are going to get 5. Committee questions, and we're going to take a vote. All right? Representative McCoy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here. House Bill 563, I heard you guys talk in the last bill about doing something bold. 563 does something bold. We've taken 2 bills that were school choice bills and put them into one. And let me just be real quick with it. The first section is what we refer to in the House as the School Without Borders portion. And all this section does is actually require a school board to adopt a policy. They just have to come up with a policy of how they're going to accept non-resident students. But it takes into consideration that they may not have the capacity for that, and that's okay. That can be part of their policy. Once they adopt the policy, they have to file it with the KDE, and it doesn't even become effective until next July. So we've got a whole year here as a gap. As a part of that policy, though, one of the concerns we heard, especially from our friends in Eastern Kentucky, was that school choice sometimes is used as a good old-fashioned recruiting tool for basketball, football, and other sports. And because the focus of this bill ultimately is education, we put expressly in there that if you transfer pursuant to a policy like this, you don't get to play sports for a full year. So we're keeping the focus on education. Now, the second part of the bill is a little bit bigger, and it's the educational opportunity accounts. And those accounts have 2 components. The first is a tax credit component. And the way that's set up is that a taxpayer, whether it's an individual or a corporation, applies to the Department of Revenue for a tax credit, indicating how much they're going to donate, where it's, how much tax liability they've got. They've got to get pre-approval for all of that. That money then goes into an educational account granting authority. Once there, families, and I want to be very clear here, families who are not wealthy, who are poor, we are focused on trying to get money into the hands of people that don't have opportunities otherwise. So if you're at 175% of the reduced lunch level, then you can apply for a grant. And the grant can be used for a whole bunch of things, and the bill has a list of the items. And the first one is for tuition at a public school. Not a private school, a public school. And then it goes on and it says you can also use it for online classes. You could use it for a tutor. You could use it for basically any educational thing that mom and dad can think of that a son or daughter might need. This money is there for them. Now, in the House, this bill started with private schools being in the tuition part. And we got a lot of pushback on that. Ultimately, we took it out. But candidly, there was a floor amendment that then put it back in, but only for counties at $150,000. And I understand, Mr. Chairman, you all have a committee sub. Maybe we should adopt.
Absolutely. I was getting ready to give you a 30-second sign. So we have a motion from Senator Kasdan. Do I have a second? Second from President Givens. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. President Givens, would you like to speak briefly to the sub, sir?
Again, we need to echo the work the House has done to create space for this conversation, and we have lowered that population threshold down to 90,000. 90,000 population threshold as determined by the 2010 census, which, as we understand, it came over from the House. Currently, you were including Jefferson, Fayette, and Kenton. We are adding, by lowering this number, Boone, Hardin, Davis, Warren, and Campbell as those communities where a private tuition amount can be paid out of the scholarship funds. With that, Mr. Chairman, would you like for him to proceed with explanation, and then
Yes,
when
sir.
we need to jump back in, we can
You got about a minute left.
Well, and actually, I mean, I think that sums up the bill. And with that change, we're now going to have, just the additional lowered threshold for the private schools. Happy to answer any questions or let the opposition talk.
Very good. I'm going to go ahead and take all the testimony and then open it up to questions we have. I know Mr. Lease will want to come up after we go here. Ms. Waterbury, you're on first. If you'd identify yourself for the record and proceed. I promised 5 minutes, so there's a total of 10 for testimony, so take as you choose up to 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman McDaniel. My name is Lucy Waterbury. I'm the Vice President of Legislative Response for Save Our Schools Kentucky. Many of your members on this committee are familiar with me because many serve on the Senate Ed Committee, and that is where I spend most of my time. I will try and make my testimony brief but comprehensive. I came before the Senate Ed Committee against charter schools several years ago, and at that time, what I tried to impart was this is not how we should be doing education reform in Kentucky. And I would argue that on the last day of concurrence, that the same statement applies then as it does now. When I testified against charter schools, I was actually threatened by the former governor's staff as I was on my way to testify. I think that special interests are driving a lot of what goes into education reform, and that frightens me. I am here again today to point out some things that I think may be getting missed about public education, SBDM funding, the way that the SEEK actually plays out in districts, what I view to be the defunding of public goods. So I will go on to try and talk about each parts of those, and I will let the folks that are also in opposition maybe go into some deeper things. I serve on our SBDM, and I'm going to tell you that last Tuesday evening, my school lost its STEM lab. Gentlemen and lady, I was forced to choose between Tier 3 support, ELL, and STEM. We had to choose STEM. I am in Fayette County. My local taxes are already pretty darn high. The amount that Fayette County funds as part of SEEK is one of the highest in the Commonwealth. I was nickel taxed for safety. That's fine. I want my kids safe. But I implore you to understand that every dollar that is taken, whether it is through a tax credit, whether it is through the defunding of SEEK, whether it is taken from bus transportation reimbursements, whether it is taken from textbooks or professional development, is a dollar less to educate public school children. Now, ironically, I just listened to discussions about broadband and public utilities and how they should be regulated. And we have to make sure that the rural parts of the Commonwealth, that potential mischief doesn't happen, that we have best use of resources, and about public goods. Gentlemen and lady, public education is the foundation of our democracy. If I am in one of the richest districts in the Commonwealth and I am losing my STEM lab, what will happen across the Commonwealth as these education opportunity counts, which are really vouchers, are a Trojan horse to school choice, like we see in Florida, like we see in Arizona? This is just opening up, because the next session it will be more, and it won't be populations of just 90,000. It will every year be expanded, and the caps will be raised. And I'm sure that Ms. Bauman will probably speak to that. But I am an economist by training, and I am a realtor by trade. And I want to dispel the myth that was said in the House testimony about how economic development is around schools. It is around schools, friends, but it is about public schools. When we bring large numbers of jobs, most of those wages are not going to pay for private school. They're going to rely on public school. So the strength of our public schools in Jefferson County and Fayette County and Kenton County and Hardin County and Davies County and all of these counties, but most especially our rural counties that need those jobs, those public schools must be strong. Public money should go to public schools, so there won't be potential mischief, so there won't be bad actors, so there won't be money that is not accountable through ORRs, through the accountability of being able to serve in a board that dictates what happens to this money. When we take public money and we hand it away from the accountability and the ORR responsibility, we will have no idea. And finally, before I wrap up, I want to say, the House amendments that Josie Raymond tried to apply about anti-discrimination and making it equal opportunity, there is nothing in this bill that forces private schools to serve the students that need the most resources, that our public schools welcome with open arms and do an amazing job serving. Thank you, Mr. McDaniel, for allowing me to testify before your committee today.
Thank you, Ms. Waterbury, and excellent job keeping it right at 5 minutes. We sincerely appreciate that. With that, Mr. Campbell, the floor is going to be yours. There's 5 minutes left for you and Ms. Bauman, so however you guys choose to go is your call, but please please identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Chair McDaniel and the committee. I'm Eddie Campbell, a middle and high school music teacher and choir director from Knox County, currently serving as president of the Kentucky Education Association. I'm here today to address the proposed language regarding the voucher provisions known as education opportunity accounts and the companion tax credits that are going to impact all public services and public schools by direct reduction in our general fund. KEA opposes this bill despite its presentation. It's going to be detrimental to our public schools. The Constitution of Kentucky states that it is the responsibility of the General Assembly to provide for an efficient system of common schools throughout the state. And the Rose decision demanded that the constitutional requirement be held for public school systems to be adequately funded and ensure equity. Nothing in this bill furthers those goals. This bill provides for incentives through opportunity accounts for private school providers to charge students for many of the services that tuition provides for their students. I want to point out that these are services that our public schools are required by law to provide for free to every student. These pseudo vouchers and tax bill are nothing more than an attempt to subsidize the private schools at the expense of public schools and other critical services. These vouchers will not help all students. They only help a small number of students across the Commonwealth. This same funding needs to be, that's being redirected to vouchers in this bill could and should be used as an investment in all students by investing these funds in our public schools for transportation, technology, extended school services, services for ELL students, as guidance counselors and mental health specialists for students dealing with the trauma of a pandemic, and the list could go on and on. This bill provides for no accountability or oversight of the broadly defined education service provider. It's literally defined as a person or organization that receives education opportunity funds. They're not required to have certification or education credentials, not required to have background checks, and not required any oversight at all. In fact, the language in the bill specifically prohibits any state agency from exercising oversight and guarantees independence of the providers. So this is dangerous. It literally puts our Kentucky students and their families at the mercy of online and in-person self-appointed education service providers without any accountability to the state or to the taxpayers. This bill also states that education service providers shall not be required to alter creed, practice, admission policy, curriculum in order to accept payments for an EAO or EOA. This language opens the door for discrimination on the basis of race, religion, disability, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or for any reason that it sees fit. Public dollars should not be used for such purposes, and our Kentucky public schools educate all students no matter what. Our public schools, which are funded by public tax dollars, are held accountable to this basic standard. And we would hope this body would want to ensure that no student is ever discriminated against, especially if public tax dollars are ultimately being used to pay for an education service provider. This bill is dangerous. This bill is bad education policy, it's bad physical policy, and it's bad public policy. It does nothing to protect our students, their families, and does nothing to ensure that all students will receive a high quality public education. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Bowman.
Ms. Bowman, there's about 1 minute left here, so please proceed.
Thank you, Chair McDaniel and committee members. My name is Anna Bowman. I'm the Deputy Director at the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. I was happy to defer my time to Ms. Waterbury and Mr. Campbell. I will be following up with members of the Senate about our concerns, and I'll just hit a couple top line messages here, which we're very concerned that under House Bill 563, the resources that are made available in the program will flow inequitably to larger communities, larger economies, and leave our rural communities behind. There are no prohibitions in this bill from exactly that being able to happen, and from wealthy donors who are able to turn a profit on this program, from being able to decide which communities, down to which school, which parish, get resources that are taken from across the state, resources that would normally go through a statewide needs-based assessment that we know from lots of research, lots of good evidence, has been effective at closing our achievement gaps and helping students who are in lower income districts. I'll leave it at that, and like I said, I'll follow up with you, and please don't hesitate to be back in touch with me by email if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman. We appreciate it. Mr. Lease, do you want to go ahead and come on up here? And gentlemen, we're going to give you 5 minutes to wrap it up, and then open it up for a couple of questions, and then we're going to take a vote.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me address some things that were just said. And look, I appreciate and love a good debate, and this is what needs to happen in the world. We need to talk about topics and hear from all sides. But at the same time, we've got to be intellectually honest. And using language and boogeymen and hyperbole really has no place in a good debate. So I want to be clear about a couple of things. Number one, these are not vouchers. Anyone that tries to call this a voucher clearly doesn't know what a voucher is. Go look it up. These are not even close to vouchers. It kind of gets under my skin when we have to listen to that. Number two, this is money for every single public school in Kentucky. Every single one. So all of these arguments that this is somehow taking money from public schools are misplaced at best and are untrue at worst. Again, let's stop being intellectually dishonest. These things are regulated by the Department of Revenue. There is reporting that is required. There are audits that are required. These are for services that are not, in fact, offered by public schools. Here's an example. I went to school in Carter County, Kentucky, public school. We didn't have calculus. So when I went to Virginia Tech to be an aerospace engineer, calculus was brand new to me, but it was a rehash for everybody else. A kid like me at that school could have taken an online calculus class at my public school. That's what it's for. And they're right. Not all students are going to benefit from this. I couldn't agree more. That's not the point. The point of this bill is to help the children whose families don't have the money. and the opportunities that some of the rest of us have. So we are, in fact, going to not help everybody. We're going to help the poorest of the poor, and I think that's where we should be focused. Finally, let me just say this. Guys, Kentucky's a donut. Look at the map. Every single state that touches our borders, including West Virginia, has this kind of stuff. They've got it all. So if you're looking to bring a business into somewhere, where do you want to move to? Kentucky's great. We're centrally located. We've got railroad. We've got interstates. We've got rivers. Yeah, so does Indiana. And they've got a better tax code and better schools. So we've got to get on board. This is one of those bills where, are we going to be perfect? Not by any stretch of the imagination. Will we need to make fixes to this? Absolutely. But if we don't take a bold step, we will be left behind.
Thank you. Mr. Leach, you've got about 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listen, I'm not really here to advocate. I'm here at the request of the Representative McCoy because I was one of the early architects of the bill and here to answer questions. I have made my testimony to the Joint Committee.
Very well, sir. We do appreciate that. At this point in time, I think Senator Castleton, you had something you wanted to add or no? No, you're good. All right. Any questions or comments from the committee at this time? President Givens.
Brief comment, Mr. Chairman. For those that are watching and have not read the language thoroughly and may not be attuned to what's going on here, initially as it came over from the House, you had some full-day kindergarten funding in there. That's coming out for constitutional reasons. That piece is coming out. So the full-day kindergarten funding has to come out because we can't have an appropriation and a revenue-raising measure in the same piece of legislation. There is a strong commitment from the Senate to take a very, very thorough look this session at funding full-day kindergarten as this process moves on. In addition, Mr. Chairman, I want to point out, for all those that are fearful of the impact this is going to have, of the damage that it's perceived to potentially do, this is a 5-year time-limited pilot project. Again, a 5-year time-limited pilot project, proof of concept. If this concept is good and it succeeds and it's embraced by the taxpayers and the families of the Commonwealth, very likely we will move to expand it further across the state. Us failing to do that sunsets this project. So for everyone that's saying you're changing the landscape forever, the end of the world is coming as it relates to public funding for public education, this is a proof of concept, 5 years in a geographically limited area. So I would encourage everyone, as Representative McCoy has said, and as we've had a colleague share with us his life story of trying to attain a good education and a sacrifice that his parents and his family had to make for him to attain what he's attained, to the point that his mom lives with them now. His mom lives with he and his wife because his parents gave everything up for him to get a quality education. Those are the families we need to move this forward for, and I'm honored to support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any other? Senator McGarvey.
Thank you, Mr.
And this is going to be the last word to you, sir.
Well, we'll see. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative McCoy, I appreciate you bringing this up here. I appreciate you guys having this conversation. You and I have talked about this a little bit, Representative McCoy, about how this applies to Jefferson County. And I have some concerns over that because the hallmark of JCPS right now is choice. The reality is that kids in Jefferson County can go to any school in any public school in Jefferson County they want to. In fact, it's structured so that you take my kids, for example, who are in elementary school. They don't go to their home school because it wasn't the best fit for us. There's automatically 6 schools they can choose from. Outside of those 6, there are what I call public charter schools, magnet schools, Lincoln, Brandeis, Brown, Great House. These are all examples of schools that anyone in the entire county can apply to and go to if they want to. The problem we have is not choice. The problem we have is that there's, at a base level, there are 2 types of parents and thus 2 types of kids. Choosers and non-choosers. My problem is this bill does nothing to address the non-choosers. And so the opportunities are there for people who want to choice, for kids who have someone in their life. You know, a kindergarten student's not going to apply to go to a different school. They have to have someone in their life who cares about their education. This bill doesn't get to that. And whether it's vouchers or not, what the bill does is pull general fund dollars, because it's, as I read it, I think it's still this way in the sub, it's a dollar for dollar tax credit, which is much different than a tax deduction. So if you make $100,000 a year, you pay $5,000 in state income tax. You have a 5% tax rate. You can use every bit of your money that would come to the state general fund and put it towards one of these EOAs. And therefore, you're no longer paying state income tax, and it drains those resources from the state budget. And at least in my county where I live, in my district which I represent, I don't see how it helps the students, because they have the choice. All this is doing is giving them, in many cases, a different choice, and it's a different choice outside of the public school context with public money, which is part of the problem I have with the bill. So I appreciate you bringing it forward. I'm glad we're having this conversation, but want to give you a Jefferson County perspective on it.
Thank you for the comments, sir. We appreciate them. At this point, I will entertain a motion. Let's see, we adopted the sub, so I'll entertain a motion on the bill. Senator Castle, do I have a second? President Givens. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Buford, Senator Carroll.
I'd like to explain my aye vote, Mr. Chairman.
Cast your vote and explain, sir.
You know, I was a no on this until conversations this morning that made me more comfortable with the bill. And I do want to make a statement that I will be the first to file legislation at the first sign of any discrimination or unequal distribution of this funding. That's been my biggest holdup, because there is nothing in this legislation that will ensure that these tax credits are distributed equally throughout the state. So I have concerns about my area getting any advantage from this, but please know that I will be first in line to file legislation as soon as we identify these issues. But I do appreciate your work, and I think it's worth a shot. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Caslin.
I'd like to explain my aye vote.
Cast your vote and explain, sir.
I want to thank Representative McCoy and in the committee sub here in the Senate. This now includes the biggest population of my district. And coming from a district who has great public and great private schools, this is going to open up a lot of opportunity for the underprivileged students in my area to be able to choose the school of their choice with this. Thank you.
Senator Givens. Aye. Senator Kerr. Senator McGarvey. Senator Meredith.
I'd like to explain my vote, Mr. Chair.
Cast your vote and explain, sir.
I'm going to be a no vote at this moment, but that doesn't mean, Representative McCoy, I'm going to be a no vote on the floor. One of the things I don't like about this bill is combining two bills. I think they're two separate issues that should have been kept separate and distinct, but I appreciate your statement about a good debate. I enjoy that as well. And I certainly agree with you that there's some intellectually dishonest statements that have been made. I'm kind of tired of the inflammatory rhetoric that is attached to all these things. It's not necessary. We're not addressing the problems. But I do enjoy the debate. I'm looking forward to this going to the floor and having additional debate. We need to talk about this in earnest. So, again, I'll reserve the right to change my vote on the floor based on the debate and things I'll find out through the course of the day, because it's an ever-involving process. But I do appreciate you bringing this bill forward so we can have this candid dialogue. Thank you.
Senator Nemes.
Aye.
Senator Webb. Senator West.
Aye.
Chairman McDaniel.
Aye. There being, I believe, 6 aye votes, 2 nay votes. Measure passes. Very well. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time today. All right, last up is House Bill 372. There is a committee substitute to this, and I didn't quite hit my timing right on the last one, so I'm going to ask the staff, go ahead and distribute the committee substitute while the guests approach the table here.